Hi everyone and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. I'm having a few very action-filled weeks, so there's lots to talk about. A few weeks ago, Sony finally released a few new firmware updates for their camera, something they hadn't done in a long time. And it seems like there's a few issues, in particular with the A1 and the A7S Mark III, where there's a few connectivity issues and people having trouble recording to external video recorders, for instance. So if you're only taking photos, you might not be really affected, but it seems like there's certain areas that have been negatively affected by the new firmware updates. And these kind of issues have kind of made me hesitant to update my camera straight away when a new firmware update comes out, because Canon has had similar issues in the past, in particular with the R3 and the R5. So I guess it's very hard for these companies to bring out new firmware and test every single aspect that some person might be using, but at the same time it would be nice if new firmwares came out that we could also be confident that nothing will happen to our cameras, or at least they won't be negatively affected, because like what Nikon usually does, we want to get updates that actually help us improve our cameras and not really take something away from us. So if you updated your Sony cameras already, there shouldn't be too much of a concern, but I would keep my eye out to see if there will be another release of a firmware update to actually fix the issues that we're currently experiencing. A few weeks ago, when everyone was saying the R5 Mark II and maybe even the A1 will be announced in April, I said, hold your horses, my sources haven't heard anything about an immediate announcement, and it looks like they've been right, because Canon rumors now changed their prediction that the R5 Mark II and possibly the R1 will be announced at the end of May. So it's probably another month and a half or 2 months for us to wait to finally see what the R5 Mark II and possibly the R1 will be like, but it looks like we're at least edging closer to that exciting announcement date. And I must say, I already had high hopes onto these cameras, but now having used the A9 Mark III in the field extensively, my wish list has kind of extended what I would love to see in an R5 Mark II and an R1, and that is especially a perfectly working pre-capture implementation, something that Olympus has done for a while and now Sony has done amazingly well in the A9 Mark III. There I can choose anywhere from like 0.05 seconds to I think 2 or 3 seconds of pre-capture, and that perfectly integrates in my normal workflow. So all the raw files are just saved onto my card, and basically when I look through my files, I don't even notice that I've done any pre-capture. For me, the sweet spot with pre-capture at the moment seems to be 0.3 seconds. That seems to be my lag sometimes, and if I put a pre-capture of 0.3 seconds in there, I basically capture any moment and I hardly ever miss any shots or head turn or anything else. So having that implementation of a great pre-capture is definitely something that I think Canon has to implement in the R5 Mark II and the R1, and also in a way that it seamlessly integrates with taking the pictures, and not like they currently have on the R6 Mark II or the R7 where it's a separate file and it blocks your buffer. That way you can't really use pre-capture, but if it's anything like on that A9 Mark III, it will be an amazing feature and will save us so many moments in the field we may have missed otherwise. What are some of the features you think are must-haves in the R5 Mark II and the R1? This week I've also finally found some time to edit one of my all-time favorite images taken last year. Over the course of September and October last year, I spent countless days out in the field and the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast and sort of the mountains behind Brisbane looking for paradise rifle birds, an amazing bird of paradise species that has this amazing display where they rip up their wings and show off to the females. And you can see the amazing blue throat and the yellow in their beak. All around a fantastic experience, but these birds are incredibly hard to capture. They're in really dark rainforests, and with the action and often dappled light, you have to use really high ISOs, and often you have to be quite in uncomfortable positions. Like for the photo that has been my all-time favorite, I actually had to hand hold my R5 and the 600mm prime lens, trying to somehow get a good angle with a good background. And unlike the birds further north, the Victoria's rifle birds that are somewhat easy to photograph, these paradise rifle birds are much harder to photograph and usually only display really high up in the tree. So I was actually standing almost 4 days in front of the one branch on the Gold Coast until finally one of the birds jumped on there with the female and displayed for just a few seconds. I wish I could have also taken some video, but because I was hand holding, it wasn't really possible, but at least I got away with this one image that I really liked. The biggest challenge when editing this photo was definitely the kind of green cast and kind of little backlit situation, but one trick I always use when there's kind of strange color cast in my images is that I go to the selective color panel in Photoshop, go to the neutral channel, and then by slightly adjusting the sliders, you can very easily kind of get rid of underlying kind of green casts or magenta casts in your images. And if you want to learn more tricks on how to improve your images and get confident when it comes to the editing and get amazing results from your own images, I would highly recommend that you check out my masterclass, my PROSETS and my brush pack. With my PROSETS, I allow you with just one click to transform your RAW files. And in my masterclass, I teach you step by step everything you need to know in Photoshop to get amazing results. And with my brush pack, I make a few steps in Photoshop so much easier for you. So if that's of interest to you, make sure to check this out down there in the description. In my last early bit photo news, I was saying that I was eagerly waiting for a big package from Sony Australia, and now it's finally here. I got the A1, the new 2.8 300mm lens, the A9 Mark III, and also the f4 600mm prime lens. And so far, I had an amazing time with these cameras and lenses in the field already. I don't want to spoiler you too much because I'm going to make a full video review about this gear, but for now I can say that I've definitely gotten some images with the A9 Mark III that I would have never been able to get with any other camera, so I'm definitely impressed. I've already used the 2.8 300mm lens with the A9 in Sydney photographing people and golf, but it was hard for me to sort of judge how it would transition to nature photography. But now being able to take this lens, especially also with the 2x extender, into the field and get some great results and some fantastic action shots has been really eye-opening to me, and I very much enjoyed my time with the gear so far. The only strange thing I always find with using Sony is that you cannot have separate settings for photo and video. Yes, you can have certain settings like exposure, white balance, and so on, but the autofocus settings remain the same when you switch from photo mode to video mode. And this is definitely something that always annoys me. And if any one of you has a real workaround, I would love to hear about it in the comments. It's definitely also something that I will pass on to Sony, because normally with Canon or Nikon, if you're in photo mode, you can have certain autofocus settings. And if you switch to video on top of the camera, you can have a completely different set of settings, including the autofocus. But with Sony, for instance, if I have to spot autofocus in photo mode, I will also have to spot autofocus in video mode. But in video mode, I don't want to have to spot autofocus. I want to have a tracking wide area. Now, I don't seem to be able to have that in video mode, and when I switch back to photo mode, still have my spot autofocus. So that's definitely one thing that I find a bit annoying when setting up the cameras. But other than that, I've been very happy, especially with the A9 Mark III. The new menu is fantastic, and it's real easy to set up the camera, and it also sits amazingly well in your hand. Of all cameras I've used, this is definitely in my top 3 or top 5 in terms of ergonomics. Normally I always say Canon is by far the best, but this camera sits amazingly well in your hand, and all the buttons are just in the right places. So very well done, Sony, in that regard. And I also love the screen that basically goes in all directions, which is also fantastic. Maybe the thing that has amazed me the most though is how well this tiny 300mm lens actually works in the field, in combination with the A1 and also with the A9 Mark III, especially also in combination with the 2x telex extender. So you actually have a super lightweight under 2 kilo combo that you can carry around anywhere, that has super fast autofocus and gives you good results. So for now, I'm very impressed. Of course, I'm going to test it a lot more extensively, but I must say, I'm very impressed overall. The only thing I noticed that the A1 definitely kind of screams like it needs a bit of an update when you compare it to the A9 Mark III. The A9 Mark III in so many areas just seems so much more advanced that I definitely can't wait to see an A1 Mark II hopefully this year or early next year, because I think that camera would be truly amazing if it can incorporate some of the features from the A9 Mark III, like the pre-capture and also that incredible speed button that allows you to shoot at a much higher frame rate burst for a few seconds. One thing that will happen going forward, and it's already happening with this A9 Mark III, is that we will need lots and lots of fast memory cards like this 480GB CIF Express Type A card I'm using currently in the A9 Mark III. Because if we're consistently shooting at 60 or 120 frames per second, even if it's just in a burst mode, you will take lots and lots of images. Yesterday, I've been trying to get some epic flight shots in my backyard, and I succeeded. but I also took almost 13,000 images in about 8 hours that I was just sort of sitting there in my little home office outside working on the computer while also testing both of these cameras simultaneously. So if you're shooting in these burst modes, you definitely need some crazy fast cards and also large enough cards. If you're having small cards like these 80 or 160 terabyte Sony cards, you'll definitely run out of space constantly and will have to change cards all the time. So having these larger cards, whether it's Sony or my favorite brand ProGrade, is definitely something that I would recommend going forward. And even if you're considering buying memory cards now, I would also kind of future-proof myself by rather buying the larger 320, 650, 480 gigabyte cards rather than like 80 or 165 gigabyte cards, because down the track you will regret it because you'll likely have to buy new cards or more cards. And I don't know what your thoughts are on memory cards, but I personally like the largest cards possible, and I usually don't start below 512 gigabytes because I hate changing cards in the field. Nothing more annoying than you're just shooting away, great action happening, and then your card is full, and then you're either shooting on a slower SD card, for instance, or you actually have to change cards. So I'd rather have cards large enough that I never actually have to change my cards in the field. And some might say, what about the safety issues? But if you're using legit brands like ProGrade, for instance, you will not have any trouble, and I never had a card fail me in the field. So I think the large size is still reasonable, especially with cameras that can fill these cards so fast. And if you guys want to win some of these memory cards, ProGrade also has a Shoot Like a Pro challenge that's going on every day and every week, and you can win some nice merchandise and also some memory cards and cards reader. So why don't you head over to that and check it out? I'll link it for you down there in the description because it's definitely nice if you can win some of these cards and not have to pay a few $100s for them, isn't it? Having the big 600mm f4 Sony lens around has also finally allowed me to test out this Flex Shooter Flex Foot that is really cool. It's nice and low profile, and if you feel like your hands don't really fit underneath here anymore because you have that low profile foot, it has this built-in grip that you can just click out and then carry your lens like this and then store it away again. So I'm definitely impressed by this foot, and it's something that I'll probably put on all my lenses going forward. And also, this nice lens cap that Andrew Shea made me for my 600 Canon lens also fits perfectly on that Sony lens. Speaking about this awesome lens, let me put it away. It's probably my favorite 600mm lens out of the big 3 brands. Now Nikon is the most unique one with the built-in 1.4 teleconverter, but this Sony lens is really nice and small and light, and this is definitely the biggest advantage over my Canon RF 600mm lens, for instance, because that is significantly longer and it's very hard to force it into a backpack. In my new Naya Evo backpacks, I'm able to fit the 600mm Canon lens with an attached camera in there, but the Sony lens, for instance, is a real easy fit, so having a smaller lens is definitely advantageous. Image quality wise, all these lenses are amazing, and Nikon probably has the best image stabilization in their lens, but when it comes to the size and the weight, I'm definitely in love with the Sony lens simply because it's easier to handle and so much easier to store away. And on that note, I think it's a good time to end this week's Early Bird Photo News. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. Check out my channel membership and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in another video very soon. Bye!